Good evening, my lovelies. I believe your Earth realm planet has begun a new journey around its star. So Happy New Year! I do hope this cycle brings you all the creepiness your hearts desire. Before we begin, I have some news to kick off the new year. What some of you might not know is that I am a great fan of your Earth realm music, and every so often I can't help but kidnap some of your musicians. I keep them in my little dungeon where I get to torture them into performing for me until they drop dead. But, as they say, sharing is caring. So, as of next week, I'm going to get them to play for you too. Once a week, I will release a special 2-story episode and feature a song by my prisoners in between the two. It's something a little different, so let me know your thoughts. Oh, and if you have new artists in mind you'd like me to kidnap, or if you're a musician yourself and think you could handle a night in my dungeon, pop me an email at lady.mccreepster@gmail.com. Look in the description below for more details. And now, on with tonight's story. A lot of you want updates on Frank and Teddy and Mr. Rogers, so I thought we'd go and check back in on them. When we last left them, Miss Hatchetface wanted to talk to him about a private matter. Let's see what that was all about, shall we? So come, lean in closer, and we'll begin. I woke up the morning after my discussion with Miss Hatchetface, feeling sore, both mentally and physically. It turns out that she had wanted to discuss some things that my body and mind were both woefully unprepared for, and for the sake of maintaining what shreds of my dignity remain, I'd rather not recount them here. I'll only say that the experience left me drained and satisfied. The way one might feel after running a marathon and being beaten with shoes after they crossed the finish line. Regardless, I hope it to be the first of many long, deep conversations to come. The next morning, Miss Hatchetface brought me a tray of what I'd call a demon's best attempt at breakfast in bed. She set the tray down on my lap as I fidgeted about in my torn and burned pajamas. I tried to suppress the look of deep discomfort that came reflexively to my face as I eyed my questionable breakfast. There was a large bowl filled with a mess of shiny black tentacles, still worming their way around in a green slime, a small dessert plate that seemed to consist of nothing but purple flames, and a wine glass of what I surmised by smell to be pure gasoline. Wow, this looks... wow, I said, feeling rather unconfident in my poker face. Well, I competed in Hell's Iron Chef contest, Miss Hatchetface said proudly. Really? I had no idea Hell had an Iron Chef contest, I replied. Oh, yes, said Miss Hatchetface. Although I didn't win. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy determined that it could not be conclusively proven that it was my food that had poisoned the taster. Oh. Anyways, eat up. You'll need to gain some strength back after last night. I cleared my throat nervously. I'm not hungry, I lied. Are you sure? She asked, because I had some grave and unexpected news for you, and I was hoping to at least get your blood sugar up before I told you. You what now? I asked, nervously scratching my thigh through one of the burn holes in my pajama pants. I wanted to talk about Sarah, she said. What about her? Don't you think it's a little odd that Satan answered her letter with a 7-foot-tall demon teddy bear? Well, gee, I replied, now that you mentioned it. What I mean to say is, Miss Hatchetface leaned in a bit closer to me, and I caught the scent of burning firewood with an undertone of something musky and sweet rising from her skin. Do you have any demon blood in your family? Actually, my grandfather was a demon, I said. Oh, really? No. I felt her tail, soft like lambskin, slapping gently against my calf muscle as she giggled. You're too funny, Mr. Rogers, she said, but then her voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone as she leaned even closer. Do you think that Satan answers mail from every little girl that sends letters to him? She asked, her voice full of earnestness. How many little girls send letters to Satan? Well, they have to send them to somebody, don't they? She said. I mean, Santa never answers them, that fat old drunk. Are you saying that Santa Claus is actually... Look, she cut me off. Most girls would be terrified to death of a thing like Frank and Teddy, but Sarah seems to have a natural affinity for him. She seems to have no problem controlling him whatsoever. Can you do that? Well, no, I said, but I thought that was because of how Satan designed him. Miss Hatchetface laughed harshly. This time, I was sure her tail must have left a mark as it slapped into my shins. Satan doesn't design anything. He just sits behind that desk and tells other people to design things. Still, though, somebody designed him, I said. Well, yes, but he has the soul of a demon. No ordinary mortal would be able to tame him. Satan must have known that, otherwise he never would have sent such a dangerous present in the first place. I wasn't sure if I trusted Miss Hatchetface's assessment. After all, my few experiences with Satan's judgment had resulted in fire-breathing butterflies, a TV remote that gave you tinnitus, and a giant teddy bear who had sent my neighbor to hell. Then again, it had also resulted in Miss Hatchetface herself, and I really couldn't fault him for that. So what does that mean? I asked her, dreading that the answer would be anything but, nothing at all. Your daughter is still your sweet little angel, and nothing at all has to change. But that wasn't the answer that Miss Hatchetface gave. Well, she replied, it just means that instead of learning the piano or saxophone after school, you should consider getting Sarah a tutor in satanic magic. Oh, is that all? I asked, suddenly growing very dizzy and taking a sip of that gasoline drink that Miss Hatchetface had brought me that morning. Oh, I said in surprise, it tastes like vanilla. Yes, it does, Miss Hatchetface said. Miss Hatchetface? Yes, Mr. Rogers? Are my ears smoking? Yes, Mr. Rogers. Okay. It took about an hour for the smoke in my ears to thin out to a light grey steam, and by that time, Miss Hatchetface had managed to convince me that getting Sarah an after-school satanic magic tutor was the right thing for our family. We were standing in the living room, my stomach rumbling as I watched Sarah lightly torment Frank and Teddy with the remote of minor inconveniences. First, she gave him a pig's tail. Then, she blew his ears up to the size of dinner plates. Finally, she summoned a little blue sparrow that sat on his head and lightly pecked at him every few seconds. Frank and Teddy didn't seem to mind the ears. He didn't even seem to notice the sparrow, but the pig's tail seemed to be concerning him greatly. I do not understand the purpose of this small, twirly appendage, he boomed out, craning his neck around to have a better look at it. It's funny, Sarah squealed. I see. The purpose is humor. I am suitably amused. Ha, 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 ha. Sarah threw her head back against the couch cushions and kicked her feet up and down as she erupted into wild giggling. Ahem! I cleared my throat in a non-effectual attempt to get their attention. I turned hopelessly to Miss Hatchetface, who struck 2 fingers in her mouth and woof whistled so loudly that 2 of the picture frames on the mantelpiece cracked. Ahem! I said again, noting that my voice seemed suddenly quieter, even though I was sure I was still speaking at the same volume. Sarah, Miss Hatchetface and I have had a discussion, and we've decided that from now on, you're going to be receiving lessons from a tutor in satanic magic after school. My hope that Sarah would balk at the prospect of receiving any kind of lessons after school was quashed by her enthusiastic hooray, and I resigned myself to the fact that I was going to be inviting yet another demon into the household which had already begun to feel crowded with them. So, I said, turning a little morosely back to Miss Hatchetface, now that that's settled, I guess we should write to Satan and have him send somebody up. Miss Hatchetface opened her mouth to answer, but she was interrupted by a rigid 3 knocks at the front door. She grinned sheepishly, saying, "That should be her now." Before I could ask just how in the hell, no pun intended, Satan had managed to already find out about what I had agreed, the door was swinging open and my heart was sinking all the way down to my stomach as I saw what was standing in my doorway. It had the stooped, slumping shoulders of an old woman draped in an ugly vomit green sweater that had little yarn baubles hanging off the ends of its sleeves. A reptilian tail poked out of the bottom of a thick canvas skirt, slapping on my porch in the same steady rhythm someone who has been kept waiting might impatiently tap their foot. But worst of all was the face. It was the face of an old woman, lined so many times over by unforgiving years that it looked like a crumpled piece of tissue paper with veins underneath. Its angry reptile yellow eyes were distorted behind the thick fishbowl lenses of its bifocals. But the face wasn't the worst because it was ugly. No, I could handle that. The face was the worst because it was the face of my 6th grade English teacher, Miss Robbins. "Hello, Darren," Miss Robbins croaked out in her trademark tone of perpetual disappointment. I gasped out. "What the hell are you doing here?" Miss Robbins clucked her tongue the way she did when she was about to tell you off. "I do not allow foul language in my classroom, Darren, no matter how old you are." "You're from hell," I said desperately. "How could that possibly offend you?" "Would it offend you if I used your home country as an expletive, Darren?" As Miss Robbins looked over her bifocals at me, fixing me with that yellow reptilian gaze, I all of a sudden felt like I was in the 6th grade again, and I had done something very, very wrong. Like going to the bathroom without a pass. I opened my mouth, closed it again, and turned to Miss Hatchetface. "I'm not having this spiteful old biddy teaching my kid," I said firmly. But before Miss Hatchetface could respond, I heard another smattering of giggles and turned to see Sarah standing on the end of Miss Robbins's tail as it clicked up and down, bouncing her up in the air a few inches each time. Miss Robbins was grinning down at her, the kindness of the smile managing to take some of the ugly out of her face. "Oh yes, dearie," she said. "It's quite fun, isn't it?" I suddenly remembered why I had hated Miss Robbins so much as a kid. It was because she had treated the boys like hooligans and the girls like princesses. And she wasn't such a bad English teacher in the end. I had grown up to be a writer after all. Sarah turned to me, errant strands of her hair falling over her face and sticking to her mouth. She promptly puffed them away. "Can she stay, Daddy?" she asked, putting the same look she did when she wanted an extra scoop of ice cream or an extra hour before bedtime. A look that she knew cut right through to my heart and turned me into a yes machine. "Can she?" I looked from Sarah's hopeful puppy dog eyes to Miss Hatchet-Face's encouraging grin to Frankenteddy's indifference as the sparrow continued to peck at his head. I sighed and simply said, "All right," to which Sarah responded by exploding into a chorus of cheers and seizing Frankenteddy's paw and jumping around in circles. "I am not aware of what is being discussed, so I will simply mirror your excitement," he boomed, and I noted with pleasure that Miss Robbins seemed to regard him with an obvious distaste. "Would you like to step inside and take a seat?" Miss Hatchet-Face smiled kindly at Miss Robbins, but the old English/satanic magic teacher must have been immune to Miss Hatchet-Face's charm. She simply shot her a disgusted look and huffed away into my house and up the stairs, that long reptilian tail flopping ridiculously on each step as she climbed. Later that night, I was ready to hop in the shower and wash the soot off a particularly vigorous discussion with Miss Hatchet-Face when I realized that my towel was gone. I assumed that Miss Hatchet-Face had put it in the laundry, and so I left the water running and made to leave when I saw her through the crack in the door. She was hunched over, holding something cupped between her hands and speaking to it. I can't explain why, but I closed the door again until just a tiny open space remained and pressed my ear up against it. I could only just hear what she was saying. "Yes, yes," she whispered to whatever was in her hands. "The old woman is here now, and she called me a tart, thank you very much." She paused, as if listening to something that I could not hear. No, it's fine," she went on. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Everything is going according to the plan." She paused again, this time for longer, and I began to wonder if she might have heard me. But then I heard the familiar whoosh of air that often accompanied the black and purple flames that meant something was vanishing into hell, followed by her footsteps trailing off downstairs. I decided the towel could wait, and it might behoove me to go ahead and hop in the shower. When I got out, a clean, dryer-warm towel was hanging on the outside doorknob of the bathroom. I toweled myself off, and I had just finished wrapping it around my waist when Miss Hatchet-Face came back in. "Oh, you're finished?" she giggled. "I was beginning to worry you'd drowned in here." "Oh, no, some of the soot was really caked on," I lied. She giggled again, but I saw something in her eyes that looked like suspicion. "Hey," I said, breaking the awkward silence that had fallen. "Did I hear you saying something to me while I was in the shower?" "Me?" Miss Hatchet-Face's eyes widened in surprise, though feigned or genuine, I could not tell. "I was quiet as a mouse," she said sweetly. "Just reading one of your books." Sure enough, one of my books was cracked open on the nightstand, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. As I lie awake that night, Miss Hatchet-Face's little pink chest softly rising and falling next to me, I wondered what exactly it was that I didn't suspect. Oh dear, I do wonder what Miss Hatchet-Face is up to. If you enjoyed this tale, remember to give this video a thumbs up and leave me a comment. If you're new to my lair, welcome. And do hit that subscribe button and bell icon to get notified of new uploads. That's it from me this evening, my lovelies. But as usual, remember to come back and visit me soon.